Hi everybody, here I am on a camcorder. I just wanted to do a really brief introduction to what we're going to be talking about on Monday. Just provide a little bit of background because I still find Zoom kind of awkward, so thought I'd do this awkward technology instead. It's a short video, so just please watch it through the end and let me know if you have any questions via email. One of the top things that comes to my mind when I think about the Cold War is that fear of nuclear annihilation, the use of the development and use of nuclear technology, atomic technology, and all of the fears that created. Here's just a few statistics to highlight that. By the end of the 1950s, 60% of American children reported having nightmares about nuclear war. In the 1960s, it was a slightly different question, but children were asked if they thought there would be a serious nuclear incident, and 44% of children in the 1960s said they thought there would be a serious nuclear incident. And then by 1979, and this is the reality that I remember, 70% of children felt sure there would be a nuclear attack. I was never surveyed for that, but I'm sure if I'd been asked in 1979 when I was 13 and 14, I would have answered the same way. So I just want to step back for a minute. In 1902, the Curies, Marie and Pierre, isolated radium. And when they did that, it was really exciting, and it seemed to hold so much promise because here was this element that had tremendous power. It could make life better, perhaps. But almost immediately you start to see fear about that as well. And so here are just a couple of examples from popular culture, this fear of nuclear annihilation. So there was a 1935 Western film with Gene Autry, who was the singing cowboy. It was called The Phantom Empire. His character in that film was killed with a guided radium bomb by the evil Queen Tika. The next year, two different ones that I want to talk about. The first was a film called The Invisible Ray, and the main character was played by Boris Karloff, who was a scientist doing good, but then he was infected with radiation because of an accident in his lab, and he gained the power to kill people with his touch. That same year, the comic strip Flash Gordon, a space opera adventure comic, the main character Flash Gordon sabotaged the atom furnaces that powered Ming the Merciless's Sky City. Ming had bragged that radioactivity will make me emperor of the universe. And the list could go on, and of course gets built up further and further in the 1940s, 1950s, through the end of the Cold War. The use of the A-bomb at Hiroshima and Nagasaki really brought home that destructive power. I remember talking to my dad about this. My dad was stateside. He served in the Navy throughout World War II, but he was stateside when the bombs had been dropped. They had been just doing some training, and he was about to ship off for the Pacific when they heard that the bombs had been dropped. He said they had no way to comprehend it. The ways they were explained was tons of TNT, but it was beyond the scope of their imagination to really think about that. But as the news started to come in and the newsreel footage started to come in, what it showed was not just the immediate power of death, but the after effects, that radiation poisoning, and then in the next generation, even the ways that it affected the next generation through things like birth defects. So that very much takes hold after World War II. As the United States and the Soviet Union moved to a policy of mutually assured destruction during the Cold War, people tried to come up with plans about how to protect themselves. In the email I sent with this video, I also asked you to watch the Duck and Cover instructional video this is one of the things that we're going to talk about in class on Monday. So please take a look at that video. It's only about 11 minutes long before you come to class on Monday. David Montaigne's chapter on the fallout shelters shows us how the material culture of fallout shelters was tied into politics, big business, and many other aspects of American society. He writes about Lyndon Johnson's vision of a great society. Now, I'm sure as history majors you're all familiar with this concept. It built on FDR's New Deal. Johnson and his supporters wanted to put programs in place to make America great. The way that he put it was to build a society free from poverty and racial injustice, but also to provide other basic protections like community fallout shelters. I just want to read part of one of Johnson's speeches where he lays out that Great Society policy because I think it will help us in our discussion on Monday. This is a speech in Ohio in 1964. The Great Society rests on abundance and liberty for all. It demands an end to poverty and racial injustice, to which we are totally committed in our time. But that is just the beginning. The Great Society is a place where every child can find knowledge to enrich his mind and to enlarge his talents. It is a place where leisure is a welcome chance to build and reflect, not a feared cause of boredom and restlessness. It is a place where the city of man serves not only the needs of the body and the demands of commerce, but the desire for beauty and the hunger for community. And this is just my aside, so think about that desire for beauty and hunger for community in relationship to the fallout shelters. Now back to Johnson, quote, "It is a place where man can renew contact with nature. It is a place which honors creation for its own sake and for what it adds to the understanding of the race. It is a place where men are more concerned with the quality of their goals than the quantity of their goods. But most of all, the Great Society is not a safe harbor, a resting place, a final objective, a finished work. It is a challenge constantly renewed, beckoning us toward a destiny where the meaning of our lives matches the marvelous products of our labor," end quote. So just think about that in terms of the fallout shelter and the debate over the fallout shelter. The Great Society proposals targeted education, medical care, urban problems, rural poverty, and transportation mainly, but as we read or will read, also included proposals to build community fallout shelters so that most Americans could be protected. And on Monday, we'll talk about this not only in terms of the 1960s fallout shelters, but also in terms of our current pandemic, because when I was reading this chapter, I saw a lot of parallels between this desire for the federal government to provide protection for as many citizens as possible, and then alternate readings of what the role of the federal government is. So we'll talk about that on Monday. So for Monday, here is the lineup. 1, I want to have a brief discussion of Goodbye Lenin. I know not all of you will have seen it, so I'm going to keep this really brief, but if you do have a chance to see it, I really want to talk to you about it. I love this film. I think it is so brilliant in terms of the end of the Cold War, but also the material culture. So really brief discussion, like 5, 7, maybe the most 10 minutes on that. 2, I want to talk about the Duck and Cover instructional video, so make sure you take a look at that. And then the third thing and the last thing is reading discussion, starting with one of the questions Montaigne asked, which is, quote, "Would shelters do the ideological work required of them?" So think about what that means, and we'll start there and talk about other things as well. So I'll see you via Zoom on Monday. As always, if you have questions, send me an email. That's the best way to get in touch with me. Take care, wash your hands, and now wear a mask. See you Monday. Bye.